Hey there, Alex Kidman with my quick hands-on review of the iPhone SE 2020, or if you prefer, the iPhone SE 5G or the iPhone SE 3rd generation, or as Apple puts it on the box, just the iPhone SE, the new one anyway. The one that they only announced a week or so ago. Now, I should preface before I start that A, you should hit like and subscribe, because you should, and B, I've only tested this thing for 4 days at this point. That is not long enough to do a full and comprehensive review. Anyone who tells you otherwise is probably working on commission, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I am familiar, of course, with iPhones generally. I have reviewed every single model of iPhone going all the way back to the very first one. And this is an interesting beast. In many ways, it's an expected upgrade, of course. And there's some things that I really do like about it, and there's some things that I don't. These are still early observations, though, and I do need to put this through a bit more testing. So let's talk design, and let's face it, the design is the iPhone 8 design. This looks like the iPhone SE 2020 that came before it, and the iPhone 8 before that, and frankly, all the way back to the iPhone 6S. It's that design, for better or worse. I'm going to argue mostly worse, because you're only talking a 4.7-inch display that's quite small by modern standards, in a body which is bigger than the iPhone 13 mini, with a smaller screen because of those big chunky bezels and because of the Touch ID sensor. Now, some folks love the Touch ID sensor, very much prefer it to Face ID, and if that's you, great, this has it, it will work with it, it will run with it. But otherwise, the running order is not spectacular. I do like the fact that this is wrapped in much more resistant glass than prior models. Now, that's a big plus. And I'll say, look, I've not dropped downstairs. I haven't put it through any scratch tests or anything like that, because Apple only sent me the one. I don't have a spare one that I can afford to destroy. But a more durable phone is always a more desirable thing. The colorways are, look, they're okay. I suppose the advantage here is because it's basically an iPhone 8 body, there's lots and lots of cases, so you could colour it however you liked. But the Midnight is this kind of bluey black thing. It's all right, but it's not stunning. There's also the Starlight, which is your white model, and a product red version. I do like the product red phones. I like the fact that Apple does them. But let's face it, if you want colour choice, if you want the really fancy colours, you've got to buy the iPhone 13. Okay, let's shift over to the camera. Now, this is probably the most contentious point, because Apple's positioning is that this is a superstar camera, it's a new camera system, and look, they're not entirely wrong, and they're not entirely right either. What you've got is a single lens 12 megapixel sensor at the rear, matched up with the A15 Bionic processor. Now, why does the processor matter when we're talking about cameras? Because that's what does the image processing, that's what does the post-processing, that's what enables a whole host of effects. And it does give this single lens capabilities that you won't see in other single lens phones, but there's a catch. Because basically, you won't see other single lens phones. They're really just not that common anymore at this price point. At this price point in Android, you can easily get a triple lens camera. And there you're playing off a bit of quality, and I'll get to that in a second, against a lot of flexibility, because there's no actual telephoto or actual wide lens or macro or even a depth sensor on this. It's just the single lens. I totally get why Apple did it, because if they put dual lens on this, then no one's going to buy the iPhone 13 or the iPhone 13 mini. But that doesn't mean that it's great value in and of itself. Camera quality so far over the 4 days, look, it's okay. I've got some nice shots with it. The depth effect, even though it's computational, can be quite good, both front and back. But yeah, there's definitely some hard limits. This is not a photographer's phone to speak of. You could, as I said, claim, yeah, it's the best single lens camera out there. Maybe that's true, but I just don't know that that's a big plaudit. What is a big plaudit, however, is its processing power. So this has the same processor as the iPhone 13 mini, Pro and Pro Max, and it flies. There's just nothing like it in its class. Apple's ability to leverage iOS and to make it work with the hardware just gives this huge advantages. You do hit, again, a limitation with that screen size, though, because, yes, it'll run virtually everything. I mean, there might be some apps that want multi-camera or a little bit more RAM out there, but I've not hit them as yet. But it'll basically run everything iOS related quite quickly, but on that smaller screen, maybe not so impactful. I think the real story here, though, isn't the speed. It's actually the fact that because it's running the A15 Bionic, you get the promise of a lot of years of upgrades. Because it's currently effective cutting edge, it means in 3, 4, maybe more years, Apple doesn't actually specify, to be fair, but for a number of years you can expect this to see iOS upgrades. And there's a lot of those mid-range Androids, same kind of price point, they don't see this kind of deal. It's also 5G capable, only sub 6 gigahertz. The speeds I've been getting are in the 200 to 300 megabit range. That's fair, that's exactly what I'd expect for a phone of this size and speed. But there is a big catch, and that's in battery. And this I very much expected to be the case, because that iPhone 8 design that this uses really doesn't give it a whole lot of space. Now, Apple never specifies what size battery they put into these things. We will have to wait till somebody tears one down to work out how large the battery is on this. But they must be doing something, because their claim is that it's got 2 hours more battery life on average than the SE or the 8 or the 7, up to 4 if you're coming from the 6S. But those are very deliberate comparisons, because the reality for those phones is they had pretty awful battery life too. And sadly, at least based on 4 days worth of testing, I'm not impressed with the battery life on this. It can last a day if you're very, very light. So one of the 4 days, I really didn't use it very heavily, and it made it through the day. It really didn't have a problem. But I really didn't use the phone that much, besides it being in my pocket if somebody had wanted to call me. Every other day where I've used it more heavily, and when I've tried to kind of benchmark it by running streaming video and things like that, it's performed really, really badly. I mean, I'm looking at maybe half Apple's local video playback figure for streaming video. I have no idea how they're claiming 10 hours, because I could not get 10 hours of streaming YouTube out of this if I tried. So yeah, this is a big problem for this phone, because again, in this price bracket, I think it really should do better. It almost feels like a bit of a pity, if Apple's going to stick with a 4.7-inch screen, that they just didn't say, well, let's go back to an older, thicker, chunkier design, just so we can throw in more battery. And of course, it's 5G capable, which makes the battery life figure even worse. 5G is the biggest battery killer you can get out there on any phone. That's Android or iOS. When I've been using it heavily on just 5G, yeah, you can watch that battery life just fall away like crazy. Now, as I say, it's early days. This is not my absolute final verdict on this phone, but this is very much what I expected. It's a good update option if you were coming from one of those much older iPhones. You didn't want the larger display of, say, the Pro Max, for example, or even the Pro or the 13, or you just wanted to, of course, save the money while still getting a bit of a performance boost to boot. But you're going to need to carry a charger, which you don't get in the box, or a battery pack with you pretty much at all times, because if you're even a moderate user of this phone, it's not likely to last the full day. Anyway, those are my early hands-on impressions of the iPhone SE 2020. What do you think? What do you want to know? What would you like me to test? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.